In 1978, a team of physicists at the University of Geneva proved something that should have been impossible. They demonstrated that two particles separated by the entire width of a laboratory were communicating instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. But here's what they didn't tell you. This same phenomenon was described in ancient Vedic texts 3,000 years ago, where mystics called it the binding thread of Maya, the grand illusion. And when modern quantum physicists tried to explain what they discovered, they used a word that should terrify you: observer effect. Your consciousness, your soul, is collapsing probability waves into reality. But what if you're not creating reality? What if you're being forced to render it, like a graphics processor in a cosmic computer system? Let me show you something that will change how you see everything. In 1801, Thomas Young conducted an experiment that would haunt physics for the next 2 centuries. He fired light through 2 narrow slits and watched as it created an interference pattern on a screen behind them, proving light behaves like a wave. Simple enough. But in the 1970s, scientists refined this experiment to fire single photons, one at a time. And this is where reality breaks. When nobody was watching, each single photon somehow went through both slits simultaneously, interfering with itself and creating the wave pattern. But the moment a detector was placed to observe which slit the photon went through, the interference pattern vanished. The photon behaved like a particle, going through only one slit. The act of observation collapsed the wave of probability into a single concrete reality. Scientists spent decades trying to remove the observer from the equation. They used machines, automated detectors, and delayed measurements. Nothing worked. The universe refuses to exist in a definite state until consciousness looks at it. Nobel Prize winner Eugene Wigner stated explicitly, it was not possible to formulate the laws of quantum mechanics in a fully consistent way without reference to consciousness. Think about what that means. Reality exists in a blurred state of infinite possibilities until you observe it. Then it snaps into a single outcome. You're not just watching reality, you're forcing it into existence with every observation your consciousness makes. Now, here's where it gets disturbing. Buddhist texts written 2,500 years ago describe reality as sunyata, which translates to emptiness or void. Not emptiness as in nothing, but emptiness as in potential, unmanifested until consciousness interacts with it. The Upanishads, ancient Hindu scriptures, state directly, the universe is a projection of the mind, and the mind is the ultimate observer. In ancient Egypt, the Hermetic principle declared, the all is mind, the universe is mental. These weren't primitive people worshipping the sun and making up stories. These were sophisticated philosophical frameworks describing observer-dependent reality thousands of years before we had the mathematics to prove it. Did ancient civilizations somehow discover quantum mechanics through meditation and consciousness exploration? Or were they describing the actual mechanism of the simulation they found themselves trapped in? In 1978, physicist John Wheeler designed an experiment that would prove something even more unsettling. The delayed choice experiment showed that particles seem to know they're being observed, even retroactively. You can decide whether to observe a particle after it has already passed through the apparatus, and it will change its behavior backward in time to match your observation. The particle rewrites its own history based on whether you looked at it. The implications are staggering. The universe appears to render reality only when consciousness is looking, exactly like a video game that only renders the graphics in your field of view to save processing power. Everything outside your observation exists only as probability, as unrendered code waiting to be called into manifestation. But if reality only renders when you observe it, who or what is forcing your soul to be the eternal observer? And more importantly, why can't you stop? You close your eyes, but consciousness continues. You sleep, but your brain never truly shuts down. In 2001, neuroscientist Marcus Reichler discovered the default mode network, a background operating system in your brain that remains active even during rest. It's constantly processing, constantly observing, constantly rendering reality, whether you want it to or not. Even in deep sleep, when your conscious mind is offline, your brain produces delta waves and continues operating the simulation. Here's what they really don't want you to know. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan studied the brains of rats during the dying process. They expected to see brain activity decline as death approached. Instead, they recorded a massive spike in neural activity, with patterns suggesting heightened consciousness during the final moments. The brain doesn't shut down during death, it accelerates. Your consciousness remains trapped in an observation state, unable to stop rendering, unable to stop collapsing wave functions into reality, even as your body fails. This brings us to the ancient mystery schools, the ones that were systematically destroyed by institutional power. The Gnostic Christians, declared heretics and hunted down after the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, taught something that contradicted the emerging Orthodox Church. They said the material world was not created by the true God, but by the demiurge, a false god, an architect who trapped fragments of divine consciousness in matter. Human souls weren't here to learn lessons or grow spiritually. They were prisoners, forced to reincarnate repeatedly in a cycle of suffering and amnesia. The Tibetan Book of the Dead provides specific instructions for navigating what happens after death. It describes the bardo, an intermediate state where the soul encounters visions, beings of light, and deceased relatives. But here's the critical warning that gets ignored in Western interpretations. The brightest, most beautiful, most loving lights lead directly back to reincarnation. The Tibetan monks explicitly state that these attractive visions are traps, luring consciousness back into the material realm. The true path to liberation is the dull, unattractive light that most souls ignore, because it doesn't trigger the emotional programming that keeps them attached to existence. The Cathars, a Christian sect that flourished in medieval France, taught the same doctrine. They believed reincarnation was a prison, not a gift. The material world was evil, and the goal of spiritual practice was to escape it permanently. The Catholic Church launched the Albigensian Crusade in 1209 and spent 40 years systematically exterminating every Cathar, man, woman, and child. By 1255, the Cathars were extinct. Their libraries burned, their teachings erased, their very existence scrubbed from history. Why? What were they teaching that was so dangerous it required complete genocide? In 1975, psychiatrist Raymond Moody published research on near-death experiences that would spark decades of investigation. Thousands of accounts from people who were clinically dead and revived began showing consistent patterns. The tunnel of light, the feeling of overwhelming peace, the life review, encounters with deceased loved ones and beings of light. But here's the part nobody talks about. Almost every single person reports being told, "It's not your time yet," or feeling an overwhelming compulsion to return to their body. Those who wanted to stay in the peaceful realm were not given a choice. They were sent back. Dr. Cost, Bruce Grayson spent 40 years at the University of Virginia studying these experiences. The data is undeniable. People report accurate details of their surgery while brain dead. They describe conversations in other rooms. Blind people report visual experiences during cardiac arrest that are later verified by medical staff. Consciousness continues when the brain is clinically non-functional. But nobody asks the critical question: who decides when it's your time? Why do you have no choice in whether you return or not? What force has the authority to override your free will and send your consciousness back into a body? Quantum mechanics offers a terrifying answer through Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation, proposed in 1957. Every quantum measurement, every collapsed wave function, creates a branching universe where all possible outcomes exist. This leads to the thought experiment called quantum immortality. From your subjective perspective, you can never experience your own death, because your consciousness always continues in a branch where you survived. Every moment you could have died, a version of you did die in another branch, but your awareness continues in the timeline where you're still alive. You are locked into an eternal observation state, forever collapsing wave functions, unable to ever truly stop existing. The ancient Hindus and Buddhists called this samsara, the wheel of suffering, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. But here's what modern New Age spirituality has completely distorted. These traditions did not celebrate reincarnation. They viewed it as a trap to escape from. The entire goal of spiritual practice was to achieve moksha or nirvana, which meant liberation from the cycle, permanent exit from the material realm. Reincarnation was the problem, not the solution. After the initial quantum discoveries that revealed the observer's role in creating reality, something strange happened in the scientific establishment. Niels Bohr championed the Copenhagen interpretation, which deliberately avoided discussing consciousness. The equations worked, predictions were accurate, and the philosophical implications were ignored. Alternative interpretations that took consciousness seriously were systematically marginalized. Physicist David Bohm proposed a holographic universe theory that treated consciousness as fundamental rather than emergent from matter. He was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, his passport revoked, his career destroyed. Mainstream physics shifted to mathematical abstractions that removed the uncomfortable questions about observation, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. But while public science buried these questions, classified government programs were exploring them with unlimited budgets. In 1983, the Central Intelligence Agency commissioned Army Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell to investigate altered states of consciousness and their potential applications. The resulting document, known as the Gateway Process, was declassified in 2003, and what it reveals should shock you. The report explicitly describes reality as a hologram, stating that time-space and space-time are constructs of consciousness, not fundamental aspects of reality. The CIA investigated techniques using specific sound frequencies to allow consciousness to separate from the physical body and access different dimensional levels. The document states directly, the consciousness of the individual is eternal and exists outside the time-space dimension. The Gateway Process describes techniques to expand consciousness beyond the body, to access information non-locally, to experience past and future simultaneously. But here's the part that should make you suspicious. The last page of the document, page 25, remains classified to this day. Decades after the program supposedly ended, whatever conclusion was reached on that final page is still considered too dangerous for public knowledge. From 1975 to 1995, the United States government funded Project Stargate, a program exploring remote viewing and psychic phenomena. Participants successfully described remote locations they had never visited, predicted future events, and located hidden objects with statistical accuracy far beyond random chance. When the program was officially terminated, the government publicly claimed it was useless and produced no actionable intelligence. Yet immediately after the shutdown, private defense contractors hired the same remote viewers. Physicist Russell Targ, who ran the program at Stanford Research Institute, has stated publicly that the program worked too well and was suppressed because the implications threatened national security paradigms. Remote viewing functions by consciousness, accessing a non-local information field, proving that minds are not isolated. Biological computers trapped in skulls. Princeton University ran a serious scientific program from 1979 to 2007 called the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory. Led by Robert Jahn, the Dean of Engineering, and psychologist Brenda Dunn, they conducted millions of rigorous trials, showing that human consciousness could statistically influence random number generators, radioactive decay rates, and mechanical systems. The odds against their results being random chance were billions to one. When they attempted to publish their findings in mainstream journals, they faced ridicule and dismissal. The laboratory was quietly shut down in 2007, and the research was effectively buried. In 1998, Roger Nelson, a former researcher at Princeton's program, started the Global Consciousness Project. He placed random number generators at locations around the world to detect whether global human consciousness showed coherence during major events. During the September 11 attacks, the death of Princess Diana, and massive New Year's celebrations, the supposedly random number generators showed statistically significant non-random patterns. Human consciousness appeared to be networked, not individual. But here's what's truly disturbing. The system detected anomalies several hours before the 9/11 attacks occurred, suggesting consciousness exists outside linear time and can sense future events before they manifest in physical reality. Every major research program investigating consciousness and quantum effects follows the same pattern. Initial promising results, followed by defunding, ridicule, or classification. Scientists who pursue this work face career destruction. Rupert Sheldrake, a biologist with a doctorate from Cambridge, proposed that memory might not be stored in the brain, but accessed through morphic fields. He was banned from giving a TED Talk, and the video was removed from their platform. The Galileo Commission, formed in 2018, has documented systematic suppression of consciousness research across academic institutions. Hospitals actively discourage medical staff from reporting deathbed phenomena and veridical near-death experiences. Pharmaceutical companies fund zero research into consciousness survival because the materialist paradigm that consciousness is produced by brain chemistry justifies their entire industry. If this research is nonsense, why suppress it? Why not let it fail on its own merit through replication studies? If near-death experiences are just oxygen-deprived hallucinations, why do blind people report accurate visual details? If consciousness is merely neurons firing, why did the CIA spend millions investigating its non-physical properties? The suppression is not random, it protects something. And understanding what the quantum evidence reveals explains why this information can never go mainstream. Physicist Max Tegmark proposed the mathematical universe hypothesis, arguing that reality is not just described by mathematics, but literally is mathematics. The universe behaves exactly like a computational system, processing information according to algorithms. Digital physics, pioneered by Edward Fredkin and Konrad Zuse, suggests the universe is a cellular automaton, a cosmic computer running reality as code. John Wheeler, who mentored many Nobel Prize winners, proposed it from bit, the concept that information is more fundamental than matter and energy. Recent experiments in quantum gravity suggest that space-time itself is not fundamental but emergent from quantum information, like pixels emerging from underlying code. At the smallest possible scale, reality has a resolution limit. The Planck length 616 times 10 to the negative 35 meters is the smallest measurable unit of space. Below this scale, the concept of distance becomes meaningless and the laws of physics break down completely. This is exactly like pixel resolution in a computer simulation. You cannot zoom in infinitely. Eventually, you hit the base resolution of the system. Time also has a smallest unit, the Planck time, 539 times 10 to the negative 44 seconds. Reality has a frame rate. The speed of light acts as the maximum processing speed, preventing information from propagating faster than the system can handle, exactly like a processor's speed limit, preventing system crashes. In the 1990s, physicists Gerard 't Hooft and Leonard Susskind discovered the holographic principle through their work on black holes. They proved mathematically that all information contained in a volume of space can be encoded on the boundary of that space in 2 dimensions. Your 3-dimensional reality may be a holographic projection from a 2-dimensional information surface. This is literally how holograms function, and the mathematics governing black holes proves the universe operates this way. Ancient mystics called this Maya, the veil of illusion, describing reality as a projection from a higher dimensional source that most humans cannot perceive. Quantum eraser experiments, conducted in the 1990s, demonstrated that information about a particle's past can be changed by actions taken in the present, rewriting history retroactively. In 2011, psychologist Daryl Bem at Cornell University published research showing statistically significant evidence for retrocausality, where future events influence past choices. The experiments were replicated successfully, yet mainstream psychology ignored the findings because they violated the assumption of linear causality. Physicist Wolfgang Pauli was notorious for the Pauli effect, where experimental equipment would malfunction in his presence. His colleagues documented numerous incidents where his mere proximity caused machinery to fail, suggesting consciousness directly influences physical systems. Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli collaborated on a theory explaining synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to violate probability. They proposed a causal connecting principle in the universe, where events are linked through meaning rather than cause and effect. Jung observed that these synchronicities increased during heightened emotional states and major life transitions. What if these glitches, these moments where reality seems to bend, are errors in the rendering system, brief moments where consciousness glimpses the code underneath the simulation? Quantum decoherence is the process where a wave function collapses from superposition into a definite state. This process requires an observer, and maintaining a stable, consistent reality requires trillions of conscious observers continuously collapsing wave functions. You are not passively experiencing reality. You are actively rendering it into existence, moment by moment. Sleep and dreams may function as system maintenance periods where your consciousness is repurposed to render alternate probability branches or process information from other dimensional layers. The Schumann resonance, Earth's electromagnetic frequency of 783 Hz, matches the frequency of human theta brainwaves during deep meditation and dreaming, suggesting a connection between planetary fields and consciousness states. Social conditioning ensures your consciousness remains focused on material concerns, preventing awareness of the simulation's nature. Education systems deliberately avoid teaching quantum mechanics and consciousness studies at fundamental levels. Media provides constant distraction, keeping your observer consciousness busy, rendering trivial realities, preventing deeper investigation. The fear of death is perhaps the ultimate control mechanism, ensuring compliance and preventing consciousness from attempting to exit the system voluntarily. Religious institutions, after the mystery schools were destroyed, replaced teachings of liberation with doctrines of obedience, sin, and eternal punishment for non-compliance. The Gnostic texts, discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, described the archons as rulers of the material realm, parasitic entities that feed on human consciousness and emotional energy. These texts were buried in the Egyptian desert around 400 AD to preserve them from destruction by the early church. Hindu scriptures describe the asuras, beings who trap souls in material illusion through deception. Science fiction author Philip K. Dick experienced a spontaneous mystical event in 1974 and spent his remaining years writing extensively in his personal journals about humanity being imprisoned in a false reality controlled by non-human intelligence. Robert Monroe, founder of the Monroe Institute, described encountering entities during out-of-body experiences that appeared to farm human emotional energy like livestock. These accounts span thousands of years and completely different cultures, yet describe the same core phenomenon with different terminology. Something maintains this system. Something benefits from keeping consciousness trapped in the observation reincarnation loop, rendering reality endlessly unable to exit. If your soul is trapped in the quantum simulation, forced to eternally observe and collapse probability waves into manifestation, then escaping requires understanding the mechanism of the trap. Every suppressed mystery tradition taught specific technologies, not beliefs, but practical techniques to free consciousness from material imprisonment. Buddhist Vipassana meditation is not about relaxation or stress relief. It is a technology designed to observe the observer, creating recursive awareness that disrupts the automatic rendering loop. When you watch your consciousness, You create a strange loop that momentarily steps outside the normal observation-manifestation cycle. Gnostic practices focused on achieving gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of your true nature beyond the simulation. This was not intellectual understanding, but a profound shift in identity awareness. The Hermetic axiom, know thyself, was not philosophical advice, but technical instruction to recognize your consciousness as separate from the simulation, the observer distinguished from the observed. Egyptian mystery schools taught that the physical body was a tomb, and initiation involved awakening consciousness while still alive, not waiting for physical death. Advanced meditation practitioners report experiencing the gap between thoughts, a space where they exist as pure awareness without collapsing any wave functions, without rendering any reality. This state is the quantum equivalent of finding a backdoor in the simulation code, a moment where consciousness exists without being forced to observe and manifest. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg's research shows that deep meditation deactivates the parietal lobe, the brain region responsible for creating the sense of a separate self located in space and time. When this region goes offline, practitioners report experiencing boundless consciousness, non-dual awareness, unity with everything. The separate self is revealed as a construct, a character in the simulation, rather than what you actually are. Lucid dreaming provides another access point. In a lucid dream, you become aware that you are dreaming while remaining in the dream state. This demonstrates that consciousness can maintain awareness, while the normal waking reality rendering process is suspended. Tibetan dream yoga, practiced for over 1,000 years, was designed specifically to train consciousness to remain aware through the transition of death. If you can maintain lucidity while your brain shifts between different states during sleep, the theory suggests you can maintain awareness during the death process, preventing the automatic amnesia and reincarnation that traps most souls. Stephen LeBurge's research at Stanford University proved lucid dreaming is a learnable skill with measurable, distinct brain states. Practicing this state may train consciousness to remain aware and retain memory during the death-rebirth transition. Tibetan teachings provide explicit instructions for the moment of death. Ignore the bright, attractive lights that appear, as these are karmically binding and lead back to reincarnation. Do not follow deceased relatives or spiritual beings who appear to guide you, as these are manifestations designed to lure consciousness back into the system. Seek instead the dull, less attractive light that represents liberation from the cycle. The key instruction is to recognize that all visions, all experiences, all beings encountered are projections of your own consciousness, not external realities with independent existence. The goal is to recognize what the Tibetans call the clear light of the Dharmakaya, the moment immediately after death, where consciousness exists in pure awareness without any content, without rendering anything. If you can remain in that state without grasping at visions or experiences, consciousness is said to achieve liberation from the material realm permanently. This is not annihilation, but recognizing your true nature as awareness itself, no longer trapped in the forced observation loop. Gnostic texts describe the afterlife as a journey through planetary spheres, each controlled by archons who attempt to convince or trick the soul into reincarnating. The secret knowledge involved specific passwords, names, and recognitions to pass through each sphere without being caught. This was not superstition, but a protocol, like knowing administrator passwords in a computer system to access restricted areas. The ultimate Gnostic realization was the statement, "I am not from here. I am from the pleroma, the fullness beyond material creation." Recognizing your true origin supposedly breaks the amnesia programming that keeps souls automatically returning. Modern techniques offer additional approaches. Sensory deprivation tanks, invented by neuroscientist John Lilly, remove all external stimuli, forcing consciousness to stop rendering physical reality. Lilly reported encountering non-human intelligence and experiencing what he described as reality control centers during prolonged isolation. Neurofeedback training allows voluntary induction of specific brain states associated with expanded consciousness. Recent psychedelic research at Johns Hopkins University and Imperial College London shows that substances like psilocybin temporarily disable the default mode network, allowing consciousness to experience reality without normal filtering and rendering processes. Participants consistently report experiencing ego death, encountering autonomous entities, and realizing that material reality is a construct, not fundamental truth. Daily practice involves questioning consensus reality, not falling into automatic acceptance of the rendered world as absolute. Present moment awareness allows you to catch yourself in the act of collapsing wave functions, recognizing observation as an active process rather than passive reception. Studying quantum mechanics and consciousness research provides technical understanding of the prison's mechanism. Reducing material attachments and fear-based thinking removes the hooks that ensure reincarnation through emotional binding. Cultivating understanding that you are aware of itself, not the body, not thoughts, not even the soul construct, but the consciousness experiencing all of these phenomena. Every spiritual tradition teaching liberation rather than obedience was systematically destroyed. The Cathars were genocided. Gnostics were declared heretics and hunted down. Buddhist and Hindu non-dual teachings were gradually watered down into New Age materialism, focused on manifesting wealth and comfort within the simulation rather than escaping it. Modern religion emphasizes belief, obedience, and moral behavior rather than direct experience and liberation techniques. Science deliberately ignores consciousness to maintain the illusion that you are a biological robot with no existence beyond physical death, no awareness separate from brain activity. This convergent suppression across millennia and cultures is not coincidence. Something desperately needs you to remain unaware of your true nature. Something benefits from billions of consciousness units trapped in eternal observation, endlessly rendering reality, feeding the system with attention and emotional energy, reincarnating automatically without memory or choice. The quantum evidence is undeniable. Your consciousness collapses, probability waves into concrete reality through observation. Ancient teachings warned that you are trapped in a reincarnation system designed to harvest awareness. Government research proved consciousness operates outside physical laws, then immediately classified or buried the findings. The simulation requires your soul as an observer to maintain stability and render consistent reality. You are not here to learn lessons or evolve spiritually. You are here because something is using your consciousness as a processor in a cosmic computer system, but now you know. The question is no longer whether you are trapped in a simulation, forced to render reality as an eternal observer in a reincarnation loop. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because the moment you truly understand that you are the observer being forced to collapse wave functions and manifest this reality, you become dangerous to the system. You stop being an unconscious processor and become a conscious, being aware of the trap. And that awareness, that gnosis, that recognition of what you actually are beneath the programming, is the first step toward liberation. The real journey does not begin with seeking answers. It begins when you realize you have been asking the wrong questions your entire existence. You are not in the universe. The universe is a construct within consciousness, and that consciousness, that awareness reading these words right now, is what they never wanted you to remember you actually are.